Hi, I'm Jo. I'm a mixed media artist and doll maker. It's been a while since I made a Q&A video, so I asked here on the community tab and over on Instagram for your questions, and you came up with some good ones, so let's get into it. Quite a few of you wanted to know about finding inspiration. First question, simply, where does your inspiration come from? I don't know if any other artists can relate to this, but I'm pretty much inspired by everything around me. Living close to nature on the canal, much of my inspiration comes from the natural world. I'm also inspired by the music I listen to, the books I read, visual arts, mythology. At the moment, I'm reading a lot of Welsh and Celtic mythology, and that's given me so many ideas. So I'm sure some characters from the Mabinogi will find their way into future projects. It can be simple as something I see on Instagram, like a cute outfit I see someone wearing, or even a painting that catches my attention. Which brings me to the next question. Do you have any other artists or doll makers that you admire or look up to? There are so many. I love seeing what other people are creating. I wrote a list. Some of my favourites are Anna Salvador, of course, Black Ribbon Blythes, Dark Alley Dolls, Darkwood Fantasy Creatures, Creatures of Nat, Duduki Art, I'm probably butchering some of these names, Pocketful of Posies, Mr. Finch, Scott Radke, and there's some amazing illustrators too, like Adam Earlers, Stone Maiden Art, Suzanne Woolcott, Jasmine Beckett Griffith. That's just a few I can think of off the top of my head. I'm sure there are loads that I've missed. I can guarantee as I'm editing this, there'll be others that pop into my head and I'll be kicking myself for not mentioning them. What are some artists that inspire your work? All of the above. I take inspiration from pretty much every artist I admire. That doesn't mean my work will look like theirs, but I might take inspiration from their subject matter, their use of colour, the mood of their art. I think the more art you consume, the more it feeds into your own work and it kind of all mixes together into something unique. Beatrix Potter was one of my earliest influences, and of course Tim Burton's work's always been a big influence on my art too. Do you start with a name and then create the doll, or do you design the doll and then think of a name? How do you inspire yourself? Coming up with unique names is the hardest part of the doll making process for me. Bearing in mind I've made over 700 dolls at this point, very rarely I'll have an idea for a name first and then make a doll to fit that. But usually I'll make the doll and then spend a good few hours scratching my head and trying to come up with a name to fit the doll. I usually end up looking back through all my previous work and trying to figure out if I've used a name before. A lot of the names I use are inspired by nature. I might just hear something in a conversation and think, oh, that'll work well as a doll name. I try to keep a list of ideas. Whenever I think of something, I'll jot it down on the list. Then when I come to name a doll, I'll have a look through the list and then see if anything on there is a good fit. Ways of adding hair. I needle felt and it's one thing I can't get right. So if you have any advice or know of any useful tutorials or books, that would be so helpful. No problem. I actually do have a playlist of videos all about needle felting doll hair. I'll put a link up at the top of the screen somewhere. The key is to have the right gauge needle for the materials you're using. It's worth experimenting a bit and trying a few to see what works best. Make sure the head's stuffed really firmly too, so the fibres can root into it. The surface should be quite firm. There shouldn't be any give, so you don't want the fabric to sink as the needle goes into it. I've had good results on heads stuffed with polyester, Kapok and viscose. Unfortunately, cotton stuffing didn't work for me. If you can't get the fibre to felt directly into the head, what you can do is cut a sheet of felt to the shape of the area and lay that on a felting mat and then needle felt the hair into the felt to make a wig. And then you can glue that or stitch it to the doll's head. So that can be used for like clay dolls or any other kind of doll too. When you create, do you try to imagine what your customers might want, or do you create whatever bubbles out of you? I'm trying to get my business brain and my creative imagination to coincide, but it's hard to get them together. Yeah, it's difficult. If you just make whatever you think people want, you're just going to be creatively frustrated and you're going to be miserable. But if you make whatever you want, there's no guarantee that there's going to be a market for it. I think there has to be a balance between the two, especially with seasonal dolls. Around this time of year, spooky dolls like witches and ghosts are more popular. And then as we get into the Christmas period, people want something a bit more cheerful and sparkly. But if a popular movie comes out, it can totally change things, and then you'll suddenly get loads of requests for vampires or pirates or mermaids. Sometimes it can be difficult to predict what customers are going to want. So I think it's important just to experiment and see what response you get. Sometimes you can hit upon something by accident that resonates with people, and then sometimes you can just miss the mark completely. But if you like what you make and you're enjoying the process, then that does come across in the dolls you make. I think you get a feel for it over time. Different styles are also popular in different parts of the world. So sometimes it makes sense to cater your dolls to wherever you're getting the most interest from. When you're trying to build an audience, it does make sense to adapt your dolls to whatever's popular at the time. But you have to make sure you make some for you as well. You need to keep experimenting with different materials and techniques so you keep growing as an artist and don't get creatively stuck. Back to what I was saying earlier though, consume as much art in general as you can. And that way you get a constant stream of inspiration and you get a feel for any trends that are happening too. Is there a doll that you've been wanting to make but haven't for some reason? Maybe you haven't been able to get to it, don't have the right materials, or aren't sure if people would like it. Oh, there are so many I want to make. I'm quite limited at the moment by the space I have to work in and the materials I'm able to get. If you're new to the channel, I'm based on a 36-foot narrowboat in Wales, out in the middle of nowhere pretty much. So my workspace is basically a 6-foot cube. It can be a little bit challenging at times. If I had a larger studio space, somewhere more permanent, I'd like to get back into clay doll making. I made a couple of dolls with air drying clay a few years back and I really enjoyed the process, but I didn't have time to devote to properly learning to sculpt with clay. So that's something I'd love to get stuck into if I ever get the opportunity. I'm also aware that people don't have a lot of money to spend on art at the moment. So it's more difficult to find a buyer for larger or more complicated dolls. I haven't made a witch doll this year. So I'd love to make a witch complete with a decorated pointed hat and a broomstick and a little black cat even. That'd be cool. I did make a few little broomsticks like this one, but to make like a full witch complete with all the accessories, that is something, if there's a market for it, that's something I would really like to do. This is probably a good time to mention that I am now open for cloth art doll commissions. So if you're watching this thinking, oh, I wish they'd make a purple gothic clown or a green witch doll, I'll pop a link down in the description, drop me an email and let's have a chat about your ideas. I don't make celebrity dolls or copyrighted characters, but if it's an original idea and it's something I can do, I'll be happy to make it for you. Not sure if I asked this or if anyone else asked this, but have you ever thought about making a comic book or graphic novel based on your dolls, like drawing them having mini adventures or something? You know, I would love to. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but I've been working on some characters over the last couple of months. They're very much in the early stages at the moment. I made some cartoony little illustrations and the response has been really positive. So it would be awesome to turn them into some kind of a book. So watch this space. Hi, how did you find your audience? I'm making cloth dolls too. and would be happy to make it my job, but not sure if anyone will like them enough to buy. Finding your audience as an artist is very much an ongoing process. The online world is totally different now to when I started, and every time a new platform takes off, you kind of have to start again from scratch building an audience there. I think it's incredibly rare for an artist to find an audience once and then just keep them forever, without continually working to reach new people. I started out back in 2011 on Facebook. That was the platform that most people were using at that time. So I started a Facebook page and joined some doll making groups and networked with other doll makers that way. I still have the Facebook page and I post on there now and then, but I don't think the same strategy works as well today. I reached the point where I noticed my page wasn't growing anymore. My posts weren't being seen by many people, and it was just getting less traffic and less new followers in general. So I had to start building audiences elsewhere. So that's when I moved over to Instagram and here on YouTube. I think the key to building a new audience anywhere is to have a very clear idea of who your target audience is. It's useful to create what's called an avatar. You can imagine a very specific person, decide what gender they are, what age, where they live, what job they do they have any children, do they have any hobbies, any interests. You can be as creative as you want with this. Build up a very detailed profile of your imaginary viewer or customer, then tailor everything you create to that specific person. The idea is that this forces you to create a cohesive brand that's aimed to the same type of person. And then people who match the background and the personality of your avatar will start to find you. And little by little, you start to build a community of like-minded people. As your business grows, you might want to start thinking about different income streams and different arms of your business. And then you might have more than one avatar. My ideal viewer here on YouTube is different to the people who I'm reaching on my Instagram account. So I'll have a different avatar here to the one I have on Instagram. Instagram is mostly focused on selling my art and selling my dolls. It's not so much here on YouTube. I'm more in a kind of teaching, advisory, support kind of role here. So my avatar here is different to the avatar over there. If you're finding this helpful, by the way, don't forget to hit the like button and let me know. You can also subscribe if you like, so you don't miss the next one. How exactly do you calculate the prices? Any formulas I've tried so far gave me very high-end pricing, and that looks hopeless. Ooh, pricing is a tricky one. When you first start out, you're going to be way below what you feel your art is worth because you're still learning and you haven't built up an audience yet. It can be a matter of starting low and then incrementally increasing your prices until you find a level where, say, 50% of your work is selling within 6 months. You do have to take into account how much something costs to make and the time it takes to make it. So it can be a bit of a balancing act. I don't think there's an exact science to it. The thing with art is that it's totally subjective. It's not like selling generic products. You're not just buying something wholesale and then just selling it for a profit. If there's a demand for a particular artist's work and people have money to spend, the sky's the limit. People will buy a doll by an artist they love because they want that doll. There may be another doll that's half the price, but people aren't going to go and buy that one just because it's cheaper. They'll save up and they'll wait and buy the doll that they actually want. I've seen cloth dolls sell for as much as £1,000, which is around $1,300, I think, in the US. Ball-jointed dolls can go for way more than that. When we're in a bit of an economic slump, as we are at the moment, it can feel like it's impossible to sell art for what it's worth. But I don't see that as a reason to undervalue yourself. If you've spent 20 hours making a doll, you need to make sure that you're paid for 20 hours work, plus whatever materials you use, and then there's time spent taking photos, making a listing, and then packaging orders and actually sending them out as well. All that time needs to be accounted for. Think about what you're happy to pay other professionals for their time and skill. Why should your time and effort be worth any less than theirs? If your work is getting a good response from your audience, but it's not selling at a price that makes it worthwhile, you can try making smaller items for a bit and see if those are easier to sell. Or you can just work on building up your audience and hang on until the market improves. It usually does sooner or later. I've been through a couple of very quiet periods when nothing was selling and it didn't seem viable to keep making consistently. Sometimes when it's like that, you've just got to let it be for a while, work on learning some different skills and do something else to pay the bills for a while. Then suddenly you wake up one day and realise you sold $5 overnight. And that's not exaggerating, that actually did happen to me once. So yeah, it's difficult to sell handmade products right now, but it won't be like this forever. So don't sell yourself short. It's easy to get stuck in a rut as an artist, and sometimes the best thing you can do is have a go at something completely different to reboot your creativity. Watch this video next to find out more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.